skies across Scotland this evening, breezy around the coastline, but lighter winds inland. Turning chilly tonight with lows of 2 degrees. It'll be a dry end to the day in Northern Ireland with plenty of clear spells here. Lows of 13 and highs of 17 degrees. Showers in the south will ease tonight, leaving most places dry in the early hours. Chilly tonight, particularly in the countryside. That's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
we're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Schools and libraries face funding cuts. Julian Assange is set to be extradited, and Tom Hanks says he shouldn't have played a gay man on film. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to the show. How do we argue with those who are incapable of argumentation? Now, this is a question I've been grappling with for quite some time. If a child is screaming at you, wanting more sweets before dinner or something, you can try engaging them in a debate, outlining the pros and cons of ingesting unhealthy food in advance of a nutritious meal, but it really probably won't work. In the end, you just have to tell them what to do. Or better still, avoid having children in the first place. Similarly, when it comes to the digital playground known as Twitter, there are many people who you simply won't be able to reason with. And when someone just screams insults or mischaracterises your views or tells you that they know what you secretly think or just generally cannot engage in good faith, the best thing to do is block them. You don't owe anyone your time and attention, and you'll only drive yourself mad trying to reason with the unreasonable. And this week, there have been a number of people online, mostly activists, who've been complaining that blocking people on Twitter makes me a hypocrite and that it means I don't believe in free speech. Now, this is such a basic misunderstanding of free speech that you might be wondering why I should address it at all. But you'd be surprised at how widespread this misapprehension is. As the commentator Stephen Knight, known online as the Godless Spell Checker, succinctly put it, someone implying that being blocked on Twitter is somehow a violation of their free speech is the fastest way you can tell people you don't understand free speech. So given how many people are confused about this very simple idea, it's perhaps worth reminding ourselves what free speech is and what free speech isn't. Most importantly, free speech includes the right not to listen. If someone phones you up and starts shouting abuse down the line, you're not violating their free speech by hanging up. Even if they weren't being abusive, you're well within your rights to hang up. And if you block someone on social media, all it means is that you're not interested in what they've got to say. I've been blocked by hundreds of people online. Is my free speech affected? Not in the least. These people just don't want to listen to what I've got to say, and however crazy that might sound, That is their prerogative. I wrote a book on free speech in which I explained all of these very basic points. Should I start claiming that anyone who hasn't read my book is violating my free speech? Because this is the identical logic of those who complain about being blocked. What is a violation of your free speech is when a figure in authority, either the government or Silicon Valley tech giants who moderate the modern-day public square that is social media, decide to silence you. And this can be done through the enactment of hate speech laws or by censoring social media accounts. Twitter can harm your free speech by taking away your account. Another user choosing to block you cannot. And this is the key point. The block function on social media is a guarantee of free speech. It means that the decisions over what we read lies with each individual user. It means we don't need some overlord on Twitter's Trust and Safety Council to decide what is best for us. This is why it makes no sense for social media platforms to be banning accounts for being offensive. Users can decide for themselves what they're offended by, what they choose to read and what they choose to block. It's also why I've been so critical of the Tory government and its online safety bill. These draconian measures would put pressure on social media companies to censor what they call legal but harmful speech. But who's to say what's harmful? That's surely a question for each individual, not for faceless corporations with an ideological agenda, and certainly not for a government who may have a vested interest in silencing critical voices. Here's a good rule of thumb when it comes to blocking online. Just imagine if someone came up to you on the street and said, "You are an evil, ugly Nazi and you should be thrown into a live volcano." Now, what would you do in that situation? Would you stop for a moment and say, "Oh, goodness, that's an interesting point of view. Let's discuss that a little more, shall we?" Or would you just walk away? And if you would walk away, that's the equivalent of the block on social media. It's just simply not a free speech issue. Being in favour of free speech doesn't mean you want to listen to what every single maniac online has to say. It means that you don't want anyone to be censored. You can also choose to mute people online, but this does leave you open to malicious campaigns of mass reporting, so blocking is better. The echo chamber phenomenon is a real issue. I've never understood those who only want to hear their own opinions repeated back to them. How can you possibly develop your ideas if you don't ever allow yourself to be challenged? And for those of us who still believe in the power of persuasion and the capacity of human beings to keep an open mind, there is a moral duty to enter into dialogue with our critics. We do so in order that we might see our own certainties challenged, on the understanding that we might all be wrong. We always are wrong about something at any given point. But when our detractors are unable or unwilling to leave aside their prejudices, are convinced of their own infallibility, and perceive any dissent as a signifier of malevolence, how is this duty to be undertaken? Really, it's about being selective. No one who knows the first thing about me could seriously accuse me of wanting to live in an echo chamber, because I go out of my way to read books and articles by people with a different mindset. It's why every week I invite those who fundamentally disagree with my worldview onto this very show. Now, they usually decline, but at least I make the effort. But what I won't do is waste my time with online trolls, screaming abuse and sending threats. I don't have the patience. There are some people who can engage with unreasonable people. The musician Daryl Davis, for instance, has successfully de-radicalised numerous members of the Ku Klux Klan. But he has a rare talent and infinite patience. I'm grateful that people like Daryl Davis exist, but I don't have those kind of abilities. Somehow, in the quagmire of social media, we have to find a way to restore civility when it comes to our differences. If someone is calling everyone who disagrees with them a Nazi, that isn't someone who is capable of rational debate. So my advice is be selective. Talk to those who are capable of talking. Block or mute those who aren't. They're perfectly free to scurry away and scream about you as much as they like. But when it comes to conversations about sensitive and important issues, you'd be better off saving your energy for the adults. My wonderful studio guests this evening are Leo Kearse and Jonathan Cogan. So, Julian, I'm going to come to you first because I wanted to talk about this because a lot of people get so upset saying, "Oh, you blocked me on Twitter, you hate free speech." And it's so infantile. It's such a simplistic misunderstanding. You get this a lot. I've seen this from you as well.
Yeah, I get it a lot. And also, it seems bizarre. People brag about being blocked by someone as if they hold up a restraining order that a woman, filed against them as some sort of badge of honour.
Yeah, I've seen it in sort of profiles at the top. Have you ever had this, Jonathan? You're too inoffensive online, though.
I'm just such a nice person. No one's ever blocked me.
No one's ever blocked. I'm going to block you tonight.
Yeah, well, it's been a long time coming. But no, I've not really had I've not really had people, proud to be blocked by me. There's been a couple of sort of annoying people who always, say like, oh, call mum, she's missing you or something. Just, you block them. But other than that, I just try and avoid it.
Let's get some questions. Now, this week we've had some questions emailed in, and our first question came in from David. David asks, should schools and libraries suffer as councils try to save money? Well, so this story broke on Friday. The Guardian says councils are facing a £1.7 billion shortfall because of rising inflation and energy bills. And this means that school building projects, swimming pools and libraries have been earmarked specifically for emergency funding cuts. And, Leo, you're on the right. Do you think this is a good idea?
I don't like to see my money being spent at all.
Yeah. This is what I thought.
Cut back even more. Why do people need to go swimming? You can go, there's canals. Come on, you don't need state-funded swimming pools.
You can have paddling pools in your back garden. There's a hose.
Exactly, exactly. And yeah, this took people by surprise because this is about the inflation. So wages have to try and keep up with inflation. So obviously inflation is running at double digits now. So the government has to increase people's wages by, something approaching that, which is, hitting us, hugely.
But look, it's when it targets kids and schools that worries me. Because I think libraries in particular, when I was a kid, I think going to the library was one of the things I enjoyed the most. I didn't have many friends or anything. And also, but that's how I became intellectually curious, by looking at things, picking up books, and, you must support that, surely.
Yeah, to an extent, but everybody's got access to the internet in the UK. There's very few people who don't have access to the internet, and the internet has everything. It's even better than a library.
Oh yeah, but it's not better than a library. I'm going to come to you on this, Jonathan, because they do say, for instance, having a Kindle if you're a parent in the house is not a good thing. You should have books on the shelves because kids are much more likely to explore physical books rather than some digital nebulous thing.
That's true, and you can actually tell what they're reading. There's always a chance they're going to be reading some poorly written erotica, which you don't know about.
Exactly, so it's better, isn't it, generally?
Yeah.
You're a supporter of funding for libraries, and you think libraries are important, right?
No, absolutely. Like you say, things that affect children, these should be the primary things that we're paying for in society, especially things like swimming pools. We need to encourage people exercising, and I just don't... But then again, I also kind of agree with Leo, how much is being spent? Is it efficient? I don't know.
Well, Leo, to be fair, has been on this show before boasting about how he never reads books.
Or pays tax.
Well, you read one book once, you said.
Yeah, no, I do read books sometimes. I prefer, looking at the pictures. But I think the government could find cutbacks in other places. So we've had a sort of proliferation of this sort of HR micromanagement of everyone's jobs, and the training. All the BLM training and stuff like this, which doesn't deliver any productivity. When I had a proper job, all this unnecessary training and diversity and inclusion stuff just clogged things up. It just expanded and clogged up, any sort of available bandwidth.
You think it's just bad? It's money's being spent in an inefficient way.
Absolutely, and it's certainly around diversity and inclusion and all that kind of stuff. You can just tell people, don't be horrible people, be a nice person, and that's it. That's all the training you need.
Don't hire horrible, racist, homophobic people.
Yeah, exactly. Which nobody's going to in 2022 anyway.
I thought so.
So yeah, if you're a local government, hiring, HR department, you're not advertising in Der Stürmer. You're advertising in the Guardian.
Are you? That's even worse. Anyway, our next question is from Andrea. Andrea asked, "Is the English language racist?" Okay, now that does sound silly. Someone on the front row just saying no. Yeah, you're right, it's not. But this is a story about the Open University training course that says that the language English, upholds white superiority. But it's not just white people that speak English, right?
It's a great deal of people around the world who speak English.
Yeah, I'm confused about this. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I don't think a language itself can be racist. I think you can say racist things within that language. I think some people can use language to harm people, and the vast majority of people don't. But I don't think, in principle, a set of words itself is racist. It's just the language. It's evolved over however many thousands of years. It's spoken around the world by all different cultures.
It feels like an odd thing to target, isn't it?
It's very odd. And if we're looking at where money can be cut back, Santander sponsored this training to the tune of £500,000. So there's £500,000 we can save right now. And we can also fire the person whose idea at Santander it was and save even more money. But it's ridiculous. English, the language isn't racist. The people, incredibly racist. But the language...
Yeah, not like the Scots.
Not like the Scots. Oh my God.
They're so open and welcoming. I tell you what, when people hear my English accent in Glasgow, they want to hug me.
They put up some Union Jack bunting. And,
So welcoming. Hi, Nicola, if you're watching. Our next question is from Ellie. So Ellie wrote, should more black music fans go to Glastonbury? OK, so this was a big story this week. Sir Lenny Henry, and this is what he actually said. He said, it's interesting to watch Glastonbury and look at the audience and not see any black people there. I'm always surprised by the lack of black and brown faces at festivals. I think, wow, that's still very much a dominant culture thing. Now, Glastonbury, more than 200,000 people a year attend Glastonbury. That starts this Wednesday. Do you think there is a problem with diversity at Glastonbury, Jonathan?
Well, I've been a couple of times, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree that it is, I guess, a predominantly white attending festival, but I don't think that is for any particular reason other than people haven't bought tickets, perhaps, who, you know, they could.
But might that be because there isn't sufficient diversity among the acts, or...?
Oh, I think the acts at Glastonbury are massively diverse. You have all kinds of music. You have, you know, rock, hip-hop, just everything, all kinds, lots of electronic stuff, and that appeals to different people. But also, you do get different festivals which have maybe predominantly urban artists that will have a more diverse crowd. It just seems to be a completely free market thing. If people want to buy a ticket, no matter who they are, they can buy a ticket.
I'm going to say something. I don't know if this will be controversial. I don't think it will.
Go for it.
We know that ethnic minority people are overrepresented in lower income brackets, right?
Right, OK.
We also know that Glastonbury is hugely overpriced.
It's quite expensive,
Is it not the case that this is just a really posh festival and they're pricing out a lot of people who might otherwise come?
It is relentlessly middle class. I kind of felt like, you know, the piece of rough on the side when I was there, and I'm horrendous, but yeah. No, I mean, if it's too expensive, then I guess you could say, well, it's not going to be... But then again, it's a festival. They can charge what they like. I don't think they should have to...
And the economics actually suggest that it's underpriced because 2.5 million people applied for tickets. So there's a ballot, so only 1 in 18 people who apply for a ticket actually get one.
Are you serious?
So, yes,
1 in 18... So all these people, they wanted to spend their time roughing it in a tent.
Yeah.
With no hygiene or sanitary facilities. And
I don't understand
Why would you do that?
I don't understand it either.
To listen to some Ghana banjo or something.
I mean... Well, yeah, where they're playing some of that hillbilly white supremacist music.
Right, I see.
Stopping all... No, I understand how Lenny Henry feels. That's how I feel seeing the lack of white faces in adverts over 2021 to 2022. But yeah, I mean, Glastonbury is obviously going to be full of white people because it's based on British rock music, which is it's mostly.
But there are lots of British people who aren't white.
Yeah, but I mean the type of music that's at Glastonbury that has got its roots in. Like T-Rex was the first band to play there.
Oh, that's quite white.
So yeah, they're white. A lot of.
It feels like a strange thing to focus on, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to see where there's more of a balance towards black and brown faces, then there's the Mobo Awards. There's barber shops at 1 a.m. There's various.
Goodness sake, Leo. I mean, I have to say, no, but I've been to sort of LGBT events, and there's no straight people. Well, there used to be, and now it's mostly straight people, and that's even more annoying. OK, I've got another question. It's from Thomas. Thomas says, should employers go out of their way to help staff who are going through gender transition? So this is a story that caught my eye this week. This is the discount supermarket store Aldi has produced a gender transition guide. That's Aldi has done that for you. And the company says it wants to support members of staff who are undergoing transition or have transitioned. Aldi. Why are they a specialist in gender transition?
Because Marks and Spencer will have nothing to do with it.
Is that right?
Touching it. Yeah.
But if I
try that Waitrose, see what happens.
If I had gender dysphoria and I was going through that, I wouldn't go to Aldi about it. No, not personally. Lidl, maybe.
Co-op?
Yeah.
Post-op? I don't know, yeah.
I mean, I don't think they're doing actual surgery on the cheap, are they? That's not their thing. They're just...
No, good avocados, though, but yeah, it's...
Are they? Are they good avocados?
I don't eat vegetables, I don't know. It's actually technically a berry. I learned this recently. An avocado's a berry. Didn't know that.
What are you talking about?
An avocado is technically a berry. I don't want to...
News. Fake news. I'm not having this.
Call in.
No, I'm not having you spread disinformation on the channel, right? Because we get accused of that, and it's absolutely not
Ofcom will be all over us again.
Avocados are not a berry.
They are.
Ridiculous. No, nonsense. You're not talking anymore. What do you think, Leo?
Aldi guidance around people transitioning. I mean, here's some more money we can save.
Right.
So, yeah, I just think, the aim of this guidance is, it's got noble intentions to help people feel more dignity.
Yeah.
But to be honest, if you're working at Aldi, you don't have any dignity. You're there because you failed your GCSEs and you can't get a job at Tesco.
OK, if there are any Aldi employees, please just target Leo. I can't control what comes out of his mouth, unfortunately. We've got another question here. This is from Deborah. Deborah has emailed to say, would sending Julian Assange to the United States be a dark day for this country? So this is fascinating. So this week it's been confirmed that Julian Assange could be extradited within weeks. So judges say the Home Secretary can approve his extradition to face espionage charges. And, of course, Julian Assange, as you know, was the founder of WikiLeaks. And the US government has been putting a lot of pressure to have him extradited. But look, OK, Jonathan, does this not represent a serious threat to press freedom? Because Julian Assange, whatever you might think about him, whether you like him, whether you don't, he was not breaking the law by publishing documents that had been leaked to him in his capacity as a journalist.
Yes.
And if it's suddenly decided that that can be considered illegal, where does that leave other journalists who are in similar situations?
Well, absolutely. I mean, what kind of precedent does that set? If he is simply just releasing documents that were given to him, you could say he's doing his duty to pass those on. Yes, you could maybe contest that it's been there's a safety issue around it and stuff, but it does just feel like he was doing his job and his duty.
What do you think, Leo?
Well, I'd like to contest your assumption that releasing state secrets that can critically endanger the lives of assets and real people on the ground isn't illegal.
It's happened before. It's happened before when journalists have been leaked official documents from the government, and they have leaked them, they passed them on. They haven't been... Because that's a different question. The question about the validity of leaking the documents or the danger... I mean, what he would claim is that he was leaking documents because it revealed malpractice among the American government, right? The question of whether or not they should have been leaked morally or ethically is slightly different from whether a journalist who has passed these documents should be entitled to do so.
But, I mean, I think the issue with WikiLeaks was the way they went about it. So they didn't, carefully go through the documents and make sure they weren't going to release anything that would endanger people's lives. They released in big tranches, and they made, big tranches publicly available before they'd gone through. And it did endanger people's lives, most notably Julian Assange's.
Well, yeah. Have there been any cases, though, of any evidence of people coming to harm as a result of the leaks?
I'm not absolutely certain about that.
I haven't read of any. So, I mean, look, maybe that's a different point. But then what about this issue that can he have a fair trial in the US? I mean, the head of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, has already basically said he's guilty as hell, right? Is it possible that you can have a fair trial under those circumstances?
Joe Biden's president. You've got this left-leaning government, apparently. So surely they'll have sympathy for this radical.
I don't know. I don't know if it's a left-right issue. I think it's more about the dangerous precedent it could set.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there should be. It should set a bit of a precedent. I think people should be wary of leaking, because even though we don't know if anybody was killed as a result of these leaks, there were certainly assets taken out of the field, and it set back American intelligence. And I think we've got to remember that while America and the West's activities overseas aren't always conducted in a particularly good way, essentially, we're trying to spread Western liberal democracy. We're trying to, foster that. Whereas Russia and China are trying to spread authoritarianism.
OK, but that being the case, just hypothetically, that being the case, surely then, if the Western forces abroad commit an act, an atrocity, something that is in violation of human rights, wouldn't you want to see that leaked? If their whole point is to try and spread democracy and liberalism.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we should be held to higher standards than Putin's regime or the Chinese Communist Party.
OK, very interesting, and I'm sure there'll be many more debates to come about this one. So after the break on Free Speech Nation, I'll be discussing the country's first helpline aimed specifically at young lesbian, gay and bisexual people. See you in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. In 2019, Bev Jackson and Kate Harris, along with some supporters, formed Lgb Alliance, a registered charity which aims to support the rights of lesbian, gay and bisexual people. Of course, many of us are now accustomed to longer initialisms, such as LGBTQIA+, and so a charity focusing just on the LGB was immediately interpreted by some commentators as being anti-trans. Since then, the group has been the target of defamation and hostile attacks from activists and ideologues who are seemingly determined to misrepresent the group's aims. But Lgb Alliance is growing nonetheless, and this week it announced that it has received a national lottery grant for a new helpline for young LGB people. And I'm delighted to say that Bev Jackson and Kate Harris join me now in the studio. Welcome. So let's begin with your background, because I know you both come from a gay rights background. You've both been very active in the movement. Do you want to tell me a little bit about what you did before all of this began?
Well, I'm so old that I was one of the founding members of the Gay Liberation Front in the UK, in London, at the LSE in 1970. And I was 19, and I went on our first march, which was in November at Highbury Fields in 1970, and I was chosen because I was one of the 5 steering committee. I was chosen to be the spokesperson, and I just really remember that day that the journalists gathered around me to say, what are you going to say about this march of homosexuals? And I asked them, what paper do you come from? News of the World. Oh, well, and then I went around to them, mostly from the tabloids, and one man said, I'm from the Times. And I said, oh, this is really embarrassing. But anyway, I said, hello, Mr. Times. Well, and I gave some garbled speech from my 19 years of ignorance. And the one quote that ended up in the article, which you can look up in the Times in November 1970, was, it's important to know that we are not ashamed to be homosexual. And for years, after we'd made so many strides with more social acceptance, I thought, God, that was a timid thing to say. It's important to know we're not ashamed to be homosexual. But now I find, 50 years later, I have to come out of retirement to say exactly the same thing that I said then.
This is a really important point, I think, because, of course, back then, 1970, we didn't have equal marriage, didn't have equal age of consent, all these various things. There was still so much social stigma. And it would have been very brave to do what you did then. You similarly were involved, Kate, with Stonewall, I believe.
Yes, my background was very, very different to Bev's, which was brilliant because we didn't know each other 3 years ago. But her background was Gay Liberation Front. My background was women's liberation, women's aid, etc. I made the wild move into a really boring corporate job, and I worked for American Express for many years. And at that time, I got involved with Stonewall. I loved Stonewall. We all loved Stonewall at that time. It was so well respected. Everything we did was about building bridges. It was about fact. It was about reason. It was about love. And it was also about accepting disagreement, but saying, we are homosexual and we would like to have the same rights as everybody else, even if you don't like homosexuality.
Sure.
So I brought it into my workplace. I was at American Express, very involved with the Workplace Equality Index, the Diversity Champion Scheme. In fact, I wrote a short article for the Times this year saying we created a monster. Once upon a time, Stonewall represented freedom of expression, freedom of thinking, the ability to disagree. And now, sadly, that has all changed.
So I've invited Stonewall onto this programme many times, and their mantra is no debate. This has been a turn that has happened over the past 5 years, and they're now very much about the notion of gender ideology.
Yes.
And, of course, most people don't feel they have a gender identity. That is a very particular thing. So can I come to you on this, Bev? Because I've been shocked at the rise of openly homophobic remarks that I've seen online, some very vicious homophobic things, often from people who propose gender ideology as a thing. So what's going on here, and why are Stonewall failing to address it?
Up until 2015, Stonewall was an LGB organisation. It promoted the rights of LGB people. It originally was against same-sex marriage, but then came on board with it and played a good role in achieving same-sex marriage. And then it found itself, perhaps in 2015, without much left to do, and decided it had to embrace a new mission. One new mission it could have embraced, and I think perhaps it should have embraced, was to fight homophobia around the world, because there are still 69 countries around the world that criminalise homosexuality. That's something that we really ought to be fighting against. And they had another choice, which was perhaps more lucrative, I don't know, and that was to promote gender identity. And I think it's really important to say it's about gender identity, because every time we talk about gender identity, it gets into the papers as new trans rights row. It's not about trans rights.
So, I mean, because you've been described as anti-trans, an anti-trans hate group by some commentators. I mean, how do you respond to that? I mean, do you have a problem with trans people and their rights?
Well, of course not. I mean, lots of trans people support us. And we were called a hate group from within 12 hours of us having our first meeting on the basis that we were called Lgb Alliance, which was just a throwaway. I remember when I said to Kate, should we, I don't know, it's about sexual orientation, should we call ourselves Lgb Alliance? And she said, well, we could do that. We can always change it later. It was absolutely not a decision to leave out anything. It was just we felt there was a new need to fight this homophobia that you were just talking about.
It's very confusing to me, though, as well, that to say that because you're an LGB charity, that you are being exclusionary. But trans rights was never part of your remit to begin with. That wasn't something you were focusing on sexual orientation.
Well, lots of organisations are focusing on trans rights, and they have every right to. Why shouldn't they? We have a pluralist society. And for those people who do have a gender identity, which is something that, you know, we don't have and lots of people don't have, they have every right to represent those people. But we represent different people who, just as the people I represented in 1970, are attracted to other people of the same sex. But in order to be that, you have to accept that there are two sexes. And as soon as you say, oh, hang on, there aren't two sexes, no, what we've really got is a gender, and there's an infinite number of genders, and some people are not any gender at all, and then you can't, basically, you haven't got homosexuality anymore.
So this is a key point, isn't it? Because I'm just going to bring you in here on this, Kate, because Stonewall, on their website and in their promotional materials, have redefined homosexual as same-gender attracted.
Yes.
But, of course, that's not what it means. It means same-sex attracted, and actually a recognition of the biological reality of sex has been at the heart of the gay rights movement forever, really.
Yes.
So when Lgb Alliance came about, so what was your thinking? I mean, had you tried to engage with Stonewall in those early days?
Yes, it's quite interesting. As thankfully the debate has developed, people say, handy tip, why don't you speak to Stonewall? We go, oh. And as I said, Stonewall was in my DNA. Blood, sweat and tears at my civil partnership, my partner and I said, no presents, please give money to Stonewall. So believe me, I was very loyal and very supportive. But we started to develop an unease with the leadership of Stonewall. And when I say we, I mean a number of different people were involved. Many former trustees and I held meetings and we discussed, what can we do? We can't possibly be critical of Stonewall. And we ended up saying, after 2 years, where I was responsible for writing to the head of trustees at Stonewall to say, could we talk? Could we get former trustees to speak to existing trustees? Could we get a mediated discussion? All these letters went on over a period of 2 years. And at the end of it, it was clear that no debate was the rule. And that was when I was introduced to Bev. And we'd never met before, but we realised, because lots of people in the LGB world had said, we don't know what's going on. Why is T being slapped on? Where about sexual orientation, same-sex? T, equal rights and respect to T people, but they believe they want to live as closely as they can to somebody of the opposite sex. I can't see any relationship between that and being attracted to somebody of the same sex.
So it's this conflation of sexual orientation and gender identity,
yes,
as though they are naturally the same thing, and of course they're not. I suppose what you could argue is that, well, both groups face marginalisation.
Well, so do so many other people in society, people with disabilities or refugees. But there is so much difference between people who are attracted to others of the same sex and people who have some kind of a problem, I think, with their identity. It's just such a separate issue that it's very unfortunate that these things have been stuck together. And you hear, for instance, on the BBC, you hear people talking about LGBT relationships. What on earth is that? Or an LGBTQ person has been... Who is an LGBTQ? It's not helpful to put all these letters together.
Well, also, I mean, so many gay people I know, in fact, I don't know any gay people who feel that Stonewall represents them anymore. So there's clearly a sense that there's a need. But where do you stand, though, when people say... I mean, I've heard critics say, there's no need for a charity for gay people anymore. We've got equality. We've got it all now. Why do we need this now?
Well, we need it particularly now because a lot of gay and lesbian, especially lesbian teens, are now being persuaded that they are really the opposite sex. I mean, in the 1950s, if a supposedly effeminate boy, he might be teased and told that he was like a girl, which was a horrible thing to say to a boy. It made him feel really awful. And these days, if you have a boy who's quite effeminate, he's told that maybe he is a girl. I mean, how is that progress? It's called progressive. It is not progressive. It's the most regressive doctrine, I think.
I also want to just bring in here the fact that the homophobia that we see now is the worst that there's ever been. And that's because this thing called gender identity ideology is like Japanese knotweed, and it now is through all the mainstream media, all the universities, all the NHS, all the government departments. We're very, very late in fighting back. Now, what worries us and what keeps me awake at night is that as a child, I was David. I know as a child, Bev was William. And I can promise you that if I was 12 now, I wouldn't be going to a therapist and saying, I think I might be a boy. I would be saying, I am a boy. I need puberty blockers now. I need hormone therapy. I need to have a double mastectomy when I'm 18. And I would have ignored everything about, you will be sterile, you will have no sexual feeling for the rest of your life, and you will be on medication. And the thing that drives us is we're fighting against the conversion therapy bill because it's a mask. So much of this discussion, for those who don't know, trans rights is used as a veil. Take back the veil and you will see what we see as a regressive and homophobic ideology that says you can't just be a kid. Our thing is let every child grow up to be what it wants. Let every child go through puberty.
So my understanding is that most children who have feelings of gender dysphoria, that is resolved through puberty in any case.
Yes.
And that gender non-conformity within children is a reliable predictor of being gay in later life.
Exactly.
So effectively you have a situation where gay kids are being told that perhaps they're straight, they're just in the wrong body.
Yeah, I mean, this is really horrifying, isn't it? When you look closely, what you see is that gay and lesbian teens are being medicalised. And if they go further, they take cross-sex hormones and they have their breasts removed, and because it's 3/4 of them are girls, that they find at the age of 25 or 26, and we hear more and more of these every day, what have I done? I've got beard growth, I've got a deep voice.
And they're a deep transition as a result.
I wasn't trans. I was so convinced. And they feel guilty because they were really convinced. They tried to convince everybody.
So for the sake of the minority who are gender dysphoric and who in later life will transition, we are effectively, potentially transitioning or putting kids onto a pathway to transition when they're not trans at all, they're just gay.
Yes, and in Scotland it's even more horrific because the government, despite the majority of the population saying they are against this, are trying to push forward with what they say is a progressive piece of policy. We say it actually, and I'm going to say this on television, you can go away and think about it and read about it, but to me, it's the end of the Enlightenment. Because don't forget, a lot of the main Enlightenment, and most important people were from Scotland. And in Scotland, they're saying, you can change sex when you're 16. A, can you change sex? No. B, do you know you're not allowed a tattoo when you're 16. So we're really worried about what's going on in Scotland, and we're campaigning hard for that legislation to be withdrawn.
So talking to you now, I mean, everything that you're describing seems eminently reasonable to me. And even if I fundamentally were to disagree with your points of view, I don't see any reason why we couldn't sit down and have that conversation. And yet, I see commentators in the media, very prominent people, calling you hateful, bigoted, fascist, far right. I mean, how can you...
Well, what's happened is that what was once the gay rights movement, which I was proud of and which I think has achieved lots of things, has been kind of subsumed into the transgender movement, which says sex isn't important and everybody has their own gender and children know from an early age what gender they are. And we are disrupting that narrative. People used to be afraid before Lgb. I think Lgb Alliance has played an important role, and I hope that's not just a feeling of self-importance, because before we came along, people who opposed the idea of gender identity were told, oh, you're being homophobic, because all the gay organisations everywhere were LGBT. They were LGBTQ or LGBTQIA, whatever. And it was homophobic, and people were afraid. They had been told, and they believed, that the push for gender identity was the new civil rights, the new step in the civil rights movement, and they thought, oh, you mustn't oppose that, that's homophobic. And then we came along and they said, sorry, actually, there's lots of people, lesbians and gay men and bisexuals, who don't agree. And so we disrupt the narrative, and that is why I think that we are called a hate group and all these unpleasant things, which are, it's difficult to live with, but...
You can see, for anybody who's not aware, please look up Alison Bailey, just the name, it's A-L-L-I-S-O-N, Alison Bailey. Look her up on Google. Tomorrow is a summing up of the Employment Tribunal. Alison Bailey is, in fact, one of the most extraordinary cases of the 21st century. She tweeted about our existence the night we formed. And since then, she has been vilified, and I probably shouldn't say too much because the case is ongoing, but please follow it in the newspapers.
This is a black lesbian.
This is a black lesbian barrister who's overcome the most extraordinary difficulties to get to where she is. And she is suing Stonewall, who should be supporting her, and she is suing the chambers with whom she was associated.
So, I mean, we don't have time to go into that now, but I would still advise people to look into her case, and particularly because a lot of it came about because she tweeted in support of you. But you are going from strength to strength, and you have a conference, I believe, at
Yes, we're very proud of that. This will be our second annual conference at the QE2 Centre in the heart of Westminster. And we had a very, very successful conference last year, and people found it inspiring, and the man who ran the projector at the back said it was he ran conferences all the time. It was the only one he'd ever found interesting. And
can we also say that it's open to everybody? Lgb Alliance is an Lgb organisation, and contrary to some of the commentariat, we are largely run by lesbians and gay men. Yes. Where we welcome support from anybody, whether they are straight, whether they are trans, whether they are LGB. What we look for is people who have open minds, who are prepared to discuss issues. And to me, that is the heart of liberal democracy. And what I'm so frightened about is we are the canary in the coal mine, because if we don't speak out, it's the lesbians particularly, and that's why I encourage you to look at the Alison Bailey trial, employment hearing. It's the lesbians in particular who are being told to be quiet, have sex with men who think they're lesbians, because otherwise you'll be transphobic. This is hard to believe. I do realise that. This is very hard to believe or to understand, but this is the truth of what's going on. And it's the young children, the young girls, who are the most vulnerable in society, who are getting the sharp end of an ideology that we think is not only regressive and homophobic, but we think it is cruel in the extreme, and it will lead to the biggest medical scandal of this century when we look back at all the girls who've had double mastectomies, who've had hormone treatment, all the boys who've had penis removal. This is unnecessary surgery on a generation of children, and the people who are promoting it, in 20 years' time, where will they be? What will they be saying?
Well, I think it's very important that we have the dialogue wherever various people stand on the issue. So thank you so much, Bev and Kate, for joining me today. Thank you.
Thank you.
After the break on Free Speech Nation, we'll discuss the controversy surrounding a pop star's use of a lyric that is apparently offensive to some people. We'll be back very, very shortly.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Later in the show, I'm going to be turning agony uncle with the help of my panel Leo Kearse and Jonathan Cogan. And we're going to help you to deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So please do email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk and we will try our level best to answer your issues. The American pop star Lizzo has changed a lyric in one of her songs because it contained a word that was considered to be offensive about disabled people. Her track, Girls, I think I'm pronouncing that right, it's GRRLS, used a derogatory term which is based around a form of cerebral palsy. Lizzo has apologised and said the following: "Let me make one thing clear. I never want to promote derogatory language. As a fat black woman in America, I've had many hurtful words used against me, so I understand the power words can have. I'm proud to say there's a new version of Girls with a lyric change. This is the result of me listening and taking action. As an influential artist, I'm dedicated to being part of the change I've been waiting to see in the world." To discuss this story, I'm delighted to be joined now by broadcaster and political commentator Paula London. Paula, you're so much more on the pulse of popular culture than me. I don't really know who Lizzo is, to be honest. She sounds perfectly nice. And I'm sure she didn't mean any offence when she used this word.
Well, I would hope she didn't mean offence, but at the end of the day, one of the most well-known sports people in the world, Tiger Woods, actually said that word himself, and he apologised, and she has a big team behind her. They must have been aware that this word is offensive in London,
it's a word that begins with S, and people will know what the word is, but actually, from my understanding, it's less offensive in American context. We're so used to hearing that as a playground insult that we assume that maybe it's the same over there.
Well, there's a huge difference between British English and American English. For instance, the word fag, we use this as a cigarette. That's obviously a very different word in America. So they could argue, don't tell us what to say when you say a very offensive word. But, I have a huge empathy for the disabled community. A lot of diverse communities, I feel, actively look for words to be offended about on a daily basis, but the disabled community don't. And I have huge amounts of respect for them. If they're upset by a word, we need to look why they're upset and change it.
Do you think, though, that there are some situations where artists, and particularly writers, poets, musicians, they might want to use provocative language as part of the statement that they're making? I mean, I'll give you an example. There was a song by Michael Jackson many years ago called They Don't Care About Us, which used a word which is a known anti-Semitic slur, but he was using that word to make a point against racism. That was part of the point. It had a certain power. Do you think that artists should have that freedom to use whatever?
Well, I think artists should stay out of politics, for one. And it's quite interesting that Cardi B, she waded into the argument with Lizzo, saying that what you said was perfectly fine, you shouldn't apologise. But that's coming from someone that uses a lot of smutty words in her music. Even Peter Andre was complaining that he caught his 14-year-old daughter sing along to WAP.
Yes.
So I think
Let's
her
not
words...
say what that stands for.
I definitely wouldn't. I think it's grotesque. I think
people
children...
know. People know.
Yeah, and I think it's awful. And I'm glad the Twitter community did forgive Lizzo.
Yes.
They did forgive her, and she changed the word within 48 hours. I don't believe in cancel culture, but she shouldn't have said it in the right place. She's a very well-known artist. She has a lot of PR people around her and management, so she should have known better.
So your view is that people should be free to say whatever they want, but they should also be criticised. People should be free to criticise.
It depends. An ableist slur, I have no time for those words. I think they're absolutely disgusting. Interestingly enough, idiot is apparently an ableist slur. And I use that word a lot. I've had quite a few idiot ex-boyfriends, etc. So I don't think it's bad to use that word. But I definitely would never, ever use the words that she used.
Isn't it? Because that's subjective then. So you're saying, these are the words that I find acceptable and the words I don't find acceptable, and she just might have a different set of rules. I don't know Lizzo, so I can't speak on her behalf. But, I'm always very wary of sort of leaping to judgment about the things that offend me. Because the things that offend me might not be the things that offend you, and vice versa.
But you have to think about, she's American, and Tiger Woods, as I said, he's one of the most well-known sportsmen in the world. He said that word. That made a lot of press, and he apologised. So her management would have known. They can't be stupid. They must have known, maybe we shouldn't use that word.
So do you think, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but do you think there's a cynical element to this? As in, we're all talking about Lizzo now, we're all talking about the song. Do you think there might be an element of, trying to get controversy?
Well, I mean, I know about PR. That's an awful way to try to get PR and to try to get record sales. Or, you don't even have record sales anymore. But I'm glad the disabled community have forgiven her, but they probably won't forget.
You think, I see. So there's a lot of anger still out there.
Well, I would have thought so, yeah. Because of what she's done, I'm not a fan of her music, but I definitely wouldn't be now. Even if she had some huge hit, I would be like, I remember what you said. So
yeah, but I mean, I suppose it depends on. Again, it's about the individual. If you take Eminem, for instance, as a good example of an act who has used some quite openly, I'd say, misogynistic and homophobic, not just phrasing, but sentiments and ideas. But I see that as wrapped up very much in the persona that he is adopting through the music, not necessarily as an authentic attack on the gay community. Am I wrong about that?
I think you have to look at the timeline. I mean, I'm not up to date with Eminem. Again, he's not my... I mean, I'm not a huge fan of music, to be honest with you. I like to listen to musicals, so I like Lionel Richie or The Drifters.
Well, Lionel Richie's never going to say anything offensive.
Well, no, of course not.
I don't think he's capable.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a big timeline. Things have changed. What you used to be able to say, you can't say anymore. You know, whether you say it in person or it's a lyric in your song. You need to think more.
Well, OK, so let's come on to... You mentioned Cardi B, and this is a very interesting one.
Yes.
Now, a lot of people in America, and particularly on the conservative right, are furious with Cardi B. And what they say is that Cardi B is like a role model.
Awful one. Awful one.
And you know, but again, I'm for artistic freedom. I think Cardi B should be able to sing about whatever she wants, use whatever words she wants. I also support your right to criticise her, but doing so, where I draw the line is censorship. I wouldn't like to see Cardi B censored. Would you like to see her censored for her songs?
Well, it's difficult. I think you have to parent your child. I mean, I don't want to bring Peter Andre into the conversation again.
Bring him in.
Let's bring him in. Peter, I hope you're watching. But he went to apparently his daughter Princess's bedroom that's 14 and heard her singing the lyrics to the WAP song and was horrified. She'd actually posted a TikTok apparently, and then she did remove it. You know, there should be, obviously you can never watch what your children are doing constantly, but for a 14-year-old girl to be singing those explicit words is awful.
Why do you think those songs always become very popular, don't they? They become very successful.
Maybe I'm prudish, but I just think, you know, I just think those words are awful. And obviously, she was a stripper as well. You know,
was she?
Yes, and she's very vocal about that. And, you know, some of her dance videos and some of her lyrics, I just think if I had a child, I definitely wouldn't be letting them listen to her songs.
It is perennial, though.
I'd be very strict.
No, fair enough. But we had this with Madonna back in the day, back with the erotica video, back with Justify My Love. We had it with,
She wasn't as bad as Cardi B now.
Wasn't she?
No.
Really?
No.
I would have said Madonna's done some pretty sort of explicit things.
But she still did it with a bit of class, I feel. I think she can get away with it. I like Madonna, bless her. Madonna, well, she can do wrong. I mean, she should put more clothes on these days. She's definitely getting on.
It does feel like a lot of this comes down to taste, doesn't it? And subjective views.
Yes.
Anyway, look, Paula, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Coming up on Free Speech Nation, there's going to be an exclusive clip from my podcast this week with the comedian Simon Evans. Do not go away.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK will be dry and sunny for most, although rain arrives into northwest Scotland later. Here are the details. Monday morning will start bright and chilly across southwest England. It'll be dry with plenty of sunny spells, but it will be rather cool with temperatures in single figures to start the day. Skies will be partly cloudy across southeast England in the morning, but there will still be plenty of sunny spells through the morning. Lots of sunshine to start the day in Wales. It'll feel chilly at dawn, but feeling pleasantly warm by late morning. A dry morning is expected in northwest England, with plenty of sunny spells and lighter winds compared to the weekend. Largely dry in the northeast, however the northerly breeze will push a few light showers onto the east coast at times. Scotland is looking dry and sunny on Monday morning, but it will be cold in places with a touch of frost in parts of the countryside. Sunshine will last through the morning in Northern Ireland, and the winds will be lighter than recent days, feeling chilly to start the day. Most places will stay dry and bright through Monday morning, however skies will gradually cloud over in northwest Scotland with outbreaks of rain later. And that's how the weather is shaping up during Monday morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. On my upcoming podcast episode, I'm joined by Simon Evans. In our conversation, we spoke about a range of issues, including the increasing use of trigger warnings and also stand-up comedy in the modern age.
A lot of it was obviously irony, jokes about the, the funny thing about the homeless is loads of them in King's Cross. Why, if you're homeless, would you choose to stay in King's Cross? The one advantage of being homeless is you can choose where you live, This kind of, almost like Prince Charles or something, just misunderstanding a social problem.
But that's what I mean, is that the assumption that the audience trusts you enough to know that that's ironic, sometimes that feels like it's dissipated. I mean, I had a heckler stand up and accuse me of misogyny for taking something I said completely at face value.
Yeah.
But until that point, I'd always assumed that audiences would trust that I obviously don't think that. And this felt like a new thing to me.
I think that is possibly a new thing, and I do think those people are out there, touch wood, they don't come to my shows very often, and they don't misunderstand what I'm doing. But in Edinburgh last year, I played in one of these Spiegel tents. It was the biggest room, because I only went up for a week, and it was a very compromised festival, but it was great in some ways. I had big audiences, and there was not much competition on. But it did mean I had some people come along who had never seen me before, and that was the only game in town.
Yes.
And I do a bit in my current show about trans, and I don't think it is particularly sort of provocative or confrontational, but it's teasing, certainly, and it points out some of the incoherent sort of, consequences of self-ID and so on.
Yes.
And I had a couple of walkouts, and they left before, of course, I get onto the bit towards the end of the show where all of that comes back and turns around and the tables are turned on me, and I make revelations about my own hormone profile, which I had, had a test, like a blood test done, and discovered that I actually was very low T myself, having sort of like ascribed all this weird behaviour to everyone being low T and drinking soy. So they didn't see that it was kind of, there was a self-deprecating second shoe that fell. But they walked out, and on the way out, as far as I understand it, they passed in front of house staff who knew nothing about me and had never seen me before. And they said, where are you going? What's the matter? And they said, disgusting, he's doing anti-trans material or something. And then I got an email from the venue saying, just to let you know, we've had complaints from some of the venue staff that you're doing anti-trans material and it makes them feel unsafe. And without going into too much detail, because they handled it fine, the venue and everything, this is the sort of thing that can happen now. It's a sort of Chinese whispers. These people hadn't even seen the material. They didn't know what they were talking about, and they didn't know the context into which eventually it is enfolded in the course of the show. But that is definitely something that's happening now, and it is something comedians need to be aware of. And it is, of course, a problem as soon as I say, you attract new people who don't understand that there might be some irony, that they don't understand that there might be some context, you know.
It's
so that is difficult.
It's difficult to know whether that's a sincere thing, whether they literally have, you know, whether they've lost the capacity to understand irony, or whether they are weaponizing the complaint system.
Yeah.
And particularly that notion of safety. Because, you know, if you say to someone, I'm unsafe, it's suddenly a health and safety issue. It's not just a criticism.
No, exactly. The whole thing has to be shut down, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To be fair to the venue, as I say, they stood their ground, and I'm grateful for them doing so. But I think they, I think it's an unresolved issue at this point. I think you're absolutely right. But I try not to think that it's necessarily used cynically. I do think a lot of young people do experience a degree of not feeling safe now. There's a book, you're probably familiar with it, The Coddling of the American Mind, Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt, and it makes quite alarming reading, you know, the extent to which young people do experience the world, not the literally physical, violent, threatening world of dangerous dogs and drug addicts and so on, but also of the notion that challenging their identity is challenging their right to exist. You know, they frame things in their mind in a way that makes it very, very difficult to have a serious conversation.
Well, I also think there are implications for the arts with that. I mean, this is my concern about the likes of trigger warnings. It's not because I think there's any big deal, you know, warning someone that they might be upset by the content. It's more that what it suggests about books, about the idea that these are little grenades primed to explode. These are dangerous things, and that discourse troubles me a little bit.
Well, there's a famous quote, isn't there? Kafka, I can't remember exactly how he says it, but something along the lines of every book should be an axe taken to the frozen sea within. You know, that's a good thing. You know, these books should explode in your brain.
Yes.
You know, otherwise, why read? You know, why not just go out and live? Because books should be able to give you more vivid, challenging experiences than you are likely to encounter on the high street. But if you feel that your mental health depends on not encountering such ideas, then you will be afraid. You know, you will think this is setting me up to experience a trauma which I might never quite escape from. As Haidt and Lukianoff say, exactly the opposite is true. You know, Nietzsche may have overstated it. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger, but he had the right idea. You know, you have to. It's a Taleb as well with his anti-fragility. We are anti-fragile, not simply robust, but actually improved. We strengthen through impact. You know, in the same way that the best way to remain young is to lift heavy weights and to jump up and down. You know, and land with impact on your poor fragile bones, because that will strengthen them. You know, the same thing occurs to your brain.
Yes, and I hadn't realised till I read that book that, you know, there is a consensus amongst cognitive behavioural therapists that the worst thing you can do is shield yourself from the potential for reignition of trauma. You know, you have to live in the world as it is.
Yeah.
And
when the trauma is fresh, it might help to say, listen, there is an incident in this book which is uncannily similar to the unpleasant experience you had last summer.
Yes.
So, you know, just brace yourself for that. But that's it, you know, so not you can therefore be excused, you know, from this semester or whatever.
But, I mean, this does have particular implications for comedy. And when I do end up finding someone I can talk to from that side of the argument, because they rarely do want to speak, they will say, you know, it's when I go to a comedy club, I have no guarantee that I won't hear something that will reignite that trauma or that will feel like an attack. And that's not fair. So what we need to do is sanitize the comedy clubs and make sure that those things don't happen.
Yeah.
You know, is that just a threat that's in my imagination, or is there something that is the art form being compromised?
Of course it is, yeah. It used to be, as everyone has been saying for some time, it's completely flipped over as well. The whole point of the left in the arts was to challenge you with things that might unsettle you and might cause you to reflect upon something unpleasant. I mean, not to make you revisit, you know, an unprovoked rape or something, you know, but certainly things that you've been trying to suppress. The point of the arts is it breaks up that surface, and those things come out and then disappear screaming into the night, you know, like those weird fizz bang fireworks, you know, and then they no longer trouble you. There was there was a female sort of performance artist, stroke comedian she was a big friend of Madonna's many years ago. Bernhardt, was it Sarah?
Oh, yes.
Sarah Bernhardt?
Sarah Bernhardt.
Yeah. She did a live show, which I went to. I can't remember if I saw it on film or whether it was a theatre, but a friend of mine was a big fan anyway. I didn't, to be honest, enjoy it exactly, but it was extraordinarily confrontational, you know. In I just don't think it would be even imaginable now. You know, it was really, goading you. It was like, are you turned on by this? Are you afraid of this? What is it inside you that doesn't like this? It was really, and that was obviously considered to be a thing of the left.
Yes.
You would have expected to see Mary Whitehouse outside that, not, the TRAs or whatever.
Well, I'm interested in this particularly because some of the most shocking theatrical things I've ever seen were when I was younger, going on the gay scene and seeing going to the Royal Vauxhall Tavern and seeing some of the extreme cabaret drag performance art stuff, which could be quite visceral and terrifying often. And then, someone sent me an image from a poster that's now up in the Royal Vauxhall Tavern saying, we will not tolerate this phobia, that phobia, this phobia within the performance. Yeah. And I'm thinking, now I haven't been back for a few years, but I can't imagine those acts that I knew performing in those venues now. I don't know how that would work with the hyper-fragility or sensitivity within that LGBTQIA community.
I did play the Vauxhall Tavern once. I remember there was a sort of comedy, gay-friendly comedy night, and I was on in the middle. And all I remember, I did not get many laughs, and then audibly heckled along the lines of, well, it's quite good looking. It was referred to as it, and I've never had anything remotely as hostile like that. It was really quite. I do remember shrinking,
Yeah.
And I'm also, of course, being flattered that I was being regarded as quite good looking, but
being sexually objectified.
Exactly, But that was. I do remember thinking that is extraordinary. How never in years. I may have happened to female comics, but I still don't think many female comics in regular comedy clubs get referred to not merely as a gender neutral, but as a degendered, pronoun.
Yeah.
And I think back to that quite often when I think about the ongoing debate about, what will be tolerated, and thinking that was in amongst the most supposedly vulnerable and marginalised peoples.
And you can listen to my whole conversation with Simon Evans on my podcast, Free Speech Nation, the podcast. That goes live right at the end of this show, and that is at 9 p.m. if you're a new viewer or listener. It's almost 8:10. This is Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Let's get some more questions from our viewers and listeners. So our first question came in from Richard, and Richard says, do you agree that trans swimmers should have their own category? Now, this is a story that broke just today. FINA, F-I-N-A, which is the Swimming World's governing body, has announced that trans athletes will no longer be able to compete against women at the top level. Transgender competitors will have to have completed their transition by the age of 12 to be able to compete in women's competitions. There will now be an open category for swimmers whose gender identity is different from their birth sex. Former Olympic silver medalist Sharon Davis, who has spoken out against trans athletes competing with women, has praised the decision. Now, we talk about this a lot on the show, Leo, but, when we saw that image of Leah Thomas, the American swimmer, on the podium, just towering over the competitors, someone who is biologically male winning all these goals.
She was on a podium.
There is that, to be fair. I've seen Leah Thomas without the podium, and it's still pretty imposing, I'll be honest. But do you think that was a kind of triggering point where people started waking up to the potential problems here?
Yeah, I think there's been a few moments. There's also BMX, and there's another picture recently where a woman held her baby. She came in third, and then number one and number two were transgender women. And they were, obviously if you compete at an elite level, as a woman, you're doing a lot of physical activity. Yeah. So even as a trans woman, you're going to build some muscle. And then it sort of it denatures your transition slightly, because all of a sudden you're sort of getting those masculine features back.
Well, see, there's the thing about this whole question is that I can understand why if your vocation is sports and you transition and you have gender dysphoria and you feel like you need to be the opposite sex or present as the opposite sex.
Yeah.
It would be hard to give up your life's dreams. And that wouldn't be easy. But on the other hand, you do have an innate advantage if you go through male puberty. That's just the way it is, right?
Yeah, pick one. You know what I mean? We all want to have everything, but just pick one. You can transition to your new gender identity, or you can be a weightlifter. You can't do both.
Do you think that's fair, Jonathan?
Well, I definitely see the point there. There is obviously a physical advantage that having gone through male puberty you have. But saying that, when I was in year 10 at school doing GCSE PE, they put me and like 4 other boys in the mixed PE class, which was like the average lazy boys and the really good girls. And I was like, oh, we're going to clear up. It's going to be so easy. And we got destroyed at basically everything.
I think that just says more about you, doesn't it?
Hey, I'm a jock. I'm a natural athlete. Except for table tennis.
And it's
table tennis.
It's a real man's sport. I can't say that, yeah.
It's also made women's sport a lot more interesting. I think, I was never interested in watching, women's college swimming before until, some hulking bloke, some hulking woman came along and started swimming against them.
Yep, I'm sure that'll be a popular opinion. Anyway, let's move on. Got a question here from Harry. Harry says, if you ban the latest Buzz Lightyear film, does it make you an idiot? And, of course, this is related to the comments from the actor Chris Evans, who voices Buzz Lightyear in the Toy Story spin-off. And the film was banned in Saudi Arabia and in the United Arab Emirates and Qatar because it contains a same-sex kiss. And then Evans said, the real truth is those people are idiots. Qatar, I thought Qatar was all for gay rights, wasn't it? That was why we were doing the football competition there.
Well,
What's it called?
They've got the death penalty for it.
Oh, do they?
But,
Apart from that?
Apart from that, I'm sure they're pretty on board with it.
So do you think that is it toys? Is it gay toys?
There's so there's a same-sex kiss between 2 female toys or female-identifying toys. I don't really know anymore.
Okay. Well, you can see why it would be confusing.
Yeah.
So do you think they're right to ban that in Saudi Arabia?
Do I think they should ban any homosexual imagery? No, I don't think they should. Surprisingly.
I want you to say that on TV. Yeah. Say you think it's disgusting.
It's completely outrageous, says Andrew. Yeah.
No, I think what they get up to behind closed doors is their business. But these are toys, though. We're talking about toys.
I don't want to correct everyone, but technically they're not toys. They're characters set in the Toy Story world. They're 2 actual people in this fictional universe. But it's based... It's a Buzz Lightyear film based on the character Buzz Lightyear, who then became a toy, if that makes sense.
I thought Buzz Lightyear was always a toy.
He's a toy, but based on a real person in this universe.
I'm confused.
Yeah,
I don't. There's a reason I don't watch kids' films. They're too complicated. Let's move on now from gay toys to another question. We've got a question here from Holly. Holly says, should straight people be casting gay roles for films? And, of course, this is Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks, who, as you know, won the Oscar for playing a gay man in the film Philadelphia, which I thought was a very good film. That film came out in 1993, and Hanks is now saying that people would no longer accept what he called the inauthenticity of a straight man playing a gay man. I don't buy this. I mean, I watched that film, and he seemed pretty damn gay.
Yeah.
Because I understand, and this might be quite unusual, I understand that an actor isn't just playing themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Even when it's Johnny Depp pretending he's got scissors for fingers.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, and Hollywood's full of gay men pretending to be straight.
Exactly.
So it seems right that on film they do it the other way around. Yeah, I mean, I think it's ridiculous. It's reductive, and it's a sort of thin end of a wedge that ends with people only being able to play themselves.
Yeah.
So, if you want to do a film about, Braveheart, for example, you're going to have to exhume the corpses of 12th century Scottish warlords to do it.
Mel Gibson wasn't even Scottish.
Yeah, can you believe that?
What right has Mel Gibson to paint his face with woad?
Yeah.
Which is what you do every Sunday.
Yeah.
And go out there and shout about freedom. He's got that right.
in my tartan miniskirt.
Yeah. And, you look wonderful in it. It suits you. What do you think? Do you think gay people should play gay roles? Should we all stay in our lane, Jonathan?
Well, this reminds me of the story with Dame Helen Mirren playing Golda Meir, the first female Israeli Prime Minister. And obviously, so Dame Helen Mirren's a non-Jew playing a Jew. And quite a few parts of the media said she was doing Jew face.
Is that a thing?
Well, that really resonated with me because Jew face was my nickname at secondary school.
Right, I see.
And it was a Jewish school, but yeah, I mean, but still, I mean, no, of course, I think actors should be able to play whoever they want as long as they're doing it kind of respectfully and accurately. Like, actors are actors, they pretend. That's the very nature of it, yeah.
It just seems pretty obvious to me.
And also, and it's a great film, and I watched it in RE, and I found it very moving, and I didn't know about any of that stuff because I was 12, and I was like, oh, AIDS is a thing, and now I know.
Yeah. So it was a powerful film at a time when there was still stigma around those things.
And I think it's his fame and gravitas that brought a lot to that movie that wouldn't have necessarily happened with another actor. I don't know.
Sure. And also, isn't it just about getting the right person for the role, right? And I think with something like Brokeback Mountain, if you'd have got 2 actually gay cowboys, they probably wouldn't have been as good, would they? Because there was a kind of frisson about the fact that they weren't actually gay, but they had to be hyper gay.
Although the anal sex scenes might have been more realistic. Because I don't know if you saw it.
I think you saw a different version of that film.
It just went straight in. There was no...
Leo, I would rather you wouldn't describe the intricacies of sexual activity on a pre-Watershed show.
Okay.
And also, Leo, it's the Sabbath.
Right, OK.
So, our next question is from Rob. And Rob says, should the Church of England apologise for events that happened in the 18th century? So, this is about the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, who said he is deeply sorry that the Church has actively supported and profited from slavery. The Church has £10.1 billion worth of assets, and the origins of that money go back to 1704, according to this article. An investigation found that it invested significantly, or it had invested funds in a company that traded in enslaved people. I imagine, though, a lot of companies and bodies and institutions at this time would have done so.
I think you're right there, but I think if this historical injustice and this money come from sort of ill-gotten places, if that's been discovered, then I think it should be pointed out and announced, and people should be made aware of it, I think.
So who gets the money now, though?
Oh, they're not going to give it away. They're just going to apologise and keep it, right?
Because that's cheap. Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think they should give it away? Do you think give it back? Who do you give it back to?
Yeah, who would you give it back to? I mean, this was 400 years ago. So, how do you identify, who's been left out?
Well, they're all dead, aren't they?
Yeah, they're all dead, and there could be ripples through time of prejudice and discrimination, from not having this money. But how do you identify that in any sort of objective way?
I don't know. I'm hoping.
I think the Archbishop, instead of virtue signalling about things that happened hundreds of years ago that he's not going to do anything substantive about, he should apologise for things he did wrongly in more recent times, such as when he covered up for a paedophile priest when he was Dean of Liverpool.
What case is this, Leo?
This was Canon John... I can't remember, but he was prosecuted for three cases.
OK, so that's in the public record, so there's no libelous issue here. That's all there. OK, yeah. I'm just checking, because it is Leo Curse. But you're right, in a sense that apologising for something that you did makes more sense than apologising for something that some dead people did.
Yeah.
Because you have no, how can you even do that? How can you even have the right to do that?
Yeah, I mean, can you apologise on behalf of other people? I don't think so. I think it's a personal thing. Maybe...
Well, also, those people aren't around to accept the apology. The people that it happened to, they might not accept it.
Yeah, I guess I see a difference between... I guess they've made an apology, but I think just acknowledging the injustice and being like, well, we've discovered this should be known as part of the historical record. Yeah, you should mention it. In terms of apologising, I don't think you can apologise for something someone else has done. That being said, if you're part of the institution, you can apologise on behalf of the institution. So
I don't know, because Oliver Cromwell killed a lot of my ancestors, so I want a check. I want some cash. So I'm hoping it happens. Anyway, we'll see. So another question now from Helen. Helen says, should a man be asked if he's pregnant before he can give blood? So this was the case of 66-year-old Leslie Sinclair, who was given 125 pints of blood. Oh, in his lifetime, sorry. I thought that was in one sitting. I was like, wow, he's huge. But so on his most recent attempt to donate blood, he was turned away after he refused to say if he'd been pregnant in the last 6 months. So he was asked this question, this is part of the Scottish National Blood Transfusion Service, and it does ask this question to promote inclusiveness. And he said, well, I'm not answering that, and so they didn't take his blood. What's going on there, Leo? It's your people.
I don't know why Scotland has grabbed this baton of ultra-progressiveness and run with it. It's not a very Scottish thing to do, but it's supposed to promote inclusiveness. It promotes ridiculousness.
It promotes not getting that man's blood when someone probably needs it.
Yeah, somebody in his 60s, being a man in his 60s, being asked if he's... I mean, even if he was a woman or a trans man, he wouldn't be able to be pregnant because he's in his 60s. So yeah, it's an utter nonsense. And it just shows this... all this diversity and inclusion stuff is just expanding to take up all available bandwidth. So this is another tick box on a form. Every year when you go back to donate blood, the tick box gets longer. The number of questions you've got to answer gets longer. We can slash all of this and save ourselves so much time and so much money by not asking ridiculous questions like, are you pregnant? You're a 66-year-old man, are you pregnant?
Are they overcompensating here? Because I used to work for the National Blood Service, and at the time, you couldn't take blood off gay men, right? So there were lots of gay activists who were very angry about this, and I was primed, because I was at reception, that if a group of gay people came in looking angry, I pressed the red button, I had a sort of gay button under the desk, and I was all up for that. It never happened, unfortunately. But you know, are they just making up for the fact that they've been discriminatory in the past?
It could be. I mean, I think part of the problem is that this man was called Leslie, which is a woman's name. So I think.
I see. That'll be the confusion.
Yeah, that's where it went wrong.
It's a very strange story. Anyway, we've got to move on now. After the break on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be discussing Ofsted's decision to downgrade primary schools if they don't teach about gender identity. See you in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. It's emerged this weekend that Ofsted inspectors are using the lack of gender identity teaching as a reason for downgrading primary schools. According to a report in The Telegraph, one school was told it requires improvement and mentioned prominently that pupils do not learn about gender identity or gender diversity. Another school was marked as inadequate, which is the lowest grade. Their report referred to a lack of gender reassignment teaching. So to discuss this story, I'm joined by the transgender teacher and journalist, Debbie Hayton. Thank you so much for joining me. This is an interesting one because there have been lots of controversies around gender identity and how it ought to be tackled in an educational scenario. Do you think that it is right that schools should be marked down for not promoting this particular worldview?
Well, I think what you said there was promoting a worldview. Schools should be there to teach children facts. They should be able to teach children information and teach children that different people have different opinions. But what seems to come here is that there is one particular ideology, this idea that we all have a gender identity which makes us male or female, and that's what, according to what I read in The Telegraph, children are expected to be taught.
So they're not being told, well, there are people who have a gender identity or feel differently about their nature, and this is a reality of life. They're being taught that this is a thing, that you all have a gender identity. Is that the problem here?
Yeah, because I don't think anybody has a gender identity. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's necessary to explain that somebody's trans. But this descriptive idea, this almost a lazy description that somebody who struggled with their sex, struggled with their biological sex, had a gender identity, it was descriptive. And it's become a definitive concept which defines us. So you're teaching children about gender identity as something definitive. It can't be proved, it can't be checked, it can't be falsified. I think it's nonsense.
But you say that you don't have a gender identity, and yet people will look at you and say, but this is a trans individual. So surely you must have had some sense of discomfort with who you were.
Yes, but I don't think we need a gender identity to have a discomfort with our sex. Lots of people have a discomfort with their sex. But why do we need to invent this concept called gender identity to explain it? I don't think we do. We just say, you've got a problem with your sex.
Is there any kind of consensus within the trans community on this? Because often we hear of the trans community and that there is a kind of homogenous view therein. But actually, there's a lot of debates going on, aren't there, about this?
There are, but most people within the trans community, to use that term, I really dislike it, actually. But most transgender people, the goal the goal used to be to transition and reintegrate into society and get on with life. It was a solution to a psychological distress. That was all it was.
When it comes to children, I was talking earlier to Kate and Bev from Lgb Alliance, and one of their concerns is the ways in which gender non-conforming children, children who don't seem naturally boyish or naturally girlish, are, in a sense, being encouraged to believe that perhaps they are in the wrong body. Do you think that this is a natural corollary of gender identity ideology, or is that perhaps overstating it?
Well, by creating this concept called gender identity, you've created this concept that somebody can be born in the wrong body, a boy in a girl's body, rather than saying you're a girl who likes playing with trucks, you're a boy who likes playing with dolls. We should be letting children be themselves and not saying, here's a different identity which you've got to identify into in order to exist. That's what we shouldn't be doing.
So why is it then we hear from groups like Ofsted, of all people, or indeed the NHS, or these sort of major institutions, who all appear to be in lockstep over this issue? They all seem to be of the view that there is such a thing as gender identity, we all have it, and that to promote or to suggest otherwise is transphobic or hateful. What do you make of that?
Well, it's who's been training them. Those are the questions we need to be asking. Who has been training Ofsted? Who's been training the NHS? Who's been training all these other organisations that have all got the same ideas? It's the people who have been doing the training have been spreading this ideology.
And who is that?
Well, there are a number of trans organisations. Stonewall UK has been training. Groups like Gendered Intelligence, groups like Mermaids, they've been running training courses and selling this, and again, I keep coming back to the word, an ideology that we all have a gender identity.
So in a sense, in order to challenge this, first we have to address the problem of these viewpoints being disseminated by various groups who are often government funded. We see the same in the civil service, we see the same in the various quangos, even in the College of Policing. So it is something that is everywhere. This is going to take an awful lot to untie, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is. When I talk to people, I will often say, who told you this and why did you believe them? And the reaction is something that people have taken these ideas on board without thinking critically themselves. A trainer comes in and says everybody's got a gender identity, and they say, well, OK, fair enough. But as adults, we should always be challenging what information we're given, or else we might be being sold nonsense.
I suppose, though, people are trying to be... It's kind of well-intentioned because they don't want to feel like they see and they hear about trans people being discriminated against, facing abuse and that kind of thing, and they don't want to be part of that. So they think this is maybe a way to address that.
Well, people want to be kind. But I would come back to the fact that I don't think gender identity exists. I don't think it's necessary. Is it kind to be encouraging trans people and the rest of society to be believing in an ideology, I think, which is fundamentally false?
OK, now, Debbie, I want to move on to another story. And this is something that happened today, actually, in Bristol. So trans rights activists wearing balaclavas clashed with feminists in Bristol this afternoon. We should be able to play some of the images of this from a few hours ago. And you can see some of the trans rights activists in black masks there. There were apparently a lot of intimidation going on. Protesters ripped up signs. They were shouting trans rights are human rights. And earlier in the day, a group called Bristol Anarchist Federation had sent a tweet calling for people to join them in opposing what they call transphobes. Wales Women's Rights Network said that women had faced absolutely appalling intimidation. They had required a police escort. We've even seen images of activists surrounding a pub, blockading a pub, and a number of feminists sort of trapped inside the pub. And this was a rally that was going on amongst feminists, gender-critical feminists, and then we have this counter-rally from... What's going on here? Is there, there appears to be a lot of conflict between these two groups.
I saw some videos this afternoon, and what I saw were men abusing women. That's what I saw. A group of men abusing a group of women. But usually, men wouldn't do that. Well, they wouldn't do it so openly. But the very fact that they're screaming trans rights, trans rights, trans rights seems to give them licence to carry out this campaign of abuse.
I'm very confused about this because a lot of the people in those images are shouting things such as "we're on the right side of history," and also they're swearing and saying things like "f TERFs" and women, and a lot of it does come across as quite misogynistic.
Yeah.
But they claim to be the good guys.
Well, go home, look after your kids was what one came out on one video. It's the most misogynistic language I've heard for a long time. But because they are supposedly protecting trans rights, campaigning for trans rights, they feel able to do this.
And also the police are present, but often people feel that the police aren't really helping in this situation because they often fly the trans rights flag and all the rest of it. And again, I come back to this point, probably very well-intentioned. But I think that argument about it being well-intentioned sort of starts falling apart when there's people in masks surrounding, blockading, intimidating, often attacking women.
I often hear there's two sides to this. There is only one side hurling out abuse. There's only one side which turns up wearing masks, screaming like this. It's not two ways. The police are in the middle. Yes, their training is to keep groups apart, allow people to engage in peaceful protest. But what was going on from those counter-protesters was not peaceful protest, and looked to me as if some stronger intervention was needed there.
You're right to mention the both sides thing, because I don't see footage of feminists attacking people, feminists shouting abuse.
No.
I don't see feminists sending death threats to people, but I see extreme trans rights activists sending death threats a lot. So there is a false equivalence here.
Well, there is, yes. There is not two sides to this in the same way. One side is hurling abuse, one side is sending death threats, one side is contacting people's employers to try and get them sacked. It's one way as this.
Couldn't we have a conversation? I mean, I keep going back to this. Why can't people just sit down as adults and discuss their differences? I respect that everyone has a different view on this. I don't respect threats or abuse or violence.
Well, it's bizarre, isn't it? It's bizarre how this has been allowed to carry on. A group of people who don't want to discuss, don't want to debate, but because they can say we're supporting trans rights, we're protecting trans people, they feel able to proceed with this campaign.
And there's just one more story I'd like to get your thoughts on this evening, Debbie. I'm sorry, we're getting a lot of value out of you tonight. And it's a story you mentioned a little earlier this hour. So swimming's world governing body has announced that trans athletes will no longer be able to compete against women at the top level. Transgender competitors will have to have completed their transition by the age of 12 to be able to compete in women's competitions. There will now be an open category for swimmers whose gender identity is different than their birth sex. So from my understanding, you know, they're suggesting that because going through puberty as a male confers extra advantages when it comes to athleticism, that's what they're trying to address here, is that right?
Well, it does. Male puberty gives you huge advantage, but it's not just the puberty which we experience as teenagers, Andrew. Boys have more testosterone at other stages of their development. So to say that as long as a transition is completed by age 12 is not going to address all the unfairness there, but there's something bigger here. What we're saying to 10, 11-year-old boys who are perhaps gender confused, if you want to be a swimmer, then and you're going to transition, you need to transition now. The clock is ticking on you. You can't afford to go through puberty. And that is something that we should not be imposing on children at all.
It does seem very young, the idea of transitioning at 10 or 11.
Well, I think it's appalling. I don't think that children at that age should be even considering it. But what the FINA is actually doing is saying to those children is that there is a scope, there is a reason here to transition at that age, and they should not be doing it.
So there's a problem here. I mean, you obviously come from a science background, you're a science teacher, so you understand this a lot better than I do. But I'm also told by some activists, and they will say, but if you take hormones for a couple of years before competing, those advantages are ironed out.
It doesn't. I've just moved house, and my wife and I have been moving furniture, and I always take the heavy end, even now.
OK, even though you have been through
Yeah.
OK, well, I think that's pretty conclusive. Anyway, thank you ever so much for joining us today. Debbie Hayton. Thank you. After the break on Free Speech Nation, my panellists Leo Kearse and Jonathan Cogan will be discussing one of the biggest issues of our day in our regular feature, Devil's Advocate. See you in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So this part of the show is called Devil's Advocate, and this is where our panellists debate one of the major topics of the day. And at the moment, we're talking about protesters, and the reason is we had a couple of people contact us online saying they were going to come and protest the show. I'm not sure what they were going to protest, just people talking. Yeah, it's really scary stuff. But then it got us thinking about protests, because recently we've had Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain, and a lot of people have been saying these protests are doing more harm than good to their own cause. So we thought we'd get two comedians to debate this one. So, are protesters idiots? So first, arguing that protesters are idiots, Leo Kearse.
Yeah, I'd like to start off by saying I do think protesters get treated harshly sometimes, like the people who stormed the Capitol in January the 6th in America. Everybody in the media was saying, "Oh, this is a coup. This is terrible. They're storming the Capitol." And then you saw the pictures, and they're following the guide ropes. It was little old grannies waving flags. I've seen America be involved in literal coups. There's always tanks, helicopter gunships, cruise missiles. Nobody's overthrown like President Mubarak with a bunch of trailer park guys dressed like the village people. So it was clearly just a stag do that got out of hand, not an actual coup. But other times, other protesters, they really don't do themselves any favours, like Extinction Rebellion. I don't think their tactics would work in Glasgow. I saw they were in Trafalgar Square. They were gluing their hands like that to buses in Trafalgar Square so the buses couldn't drive off. If you glued your hands like that to a bus in Glasgow, within about 30 seconds, somebody would come up behind you, nick your mobile phone, and have sex with you from behind. Your bum would have its own TripAdvisor page within days.
Yeah, let's moderate that language at this stage.
I know, I'm not. It's not just people on the left, people on the right as well. So the people, the anti-vax people who are protesting against 5G. Why would you protest against 5G? That's obviously the best G. Like, if you're going to protest against anything, protest against 3G. You know what I mean? You're in the bathroom waiting for your favourite video site to load, and
again, let's not mention the site that you're alluding to.
All of a sudden, it flips over to the you've got like one bar, that little 3G thing, and like, oh my God, it starts buffering, and you've got to start using your imagination. It's a living hell.
Okay, Leo Kearse, everyone. Now then, arguing that people who protest are not idiots, it's Jonathan Cogan.
I'm arguing that protesters are not idiots, other than those who have glued their hands to buses, because that sounds a bit troublesome. But yeah, I think, okay, first of all, they're just, they're exercising their right to free speech. They're expressing themselves, and they're doing it, often in quite annoying ways, but at least they're doing it. And I've got to be honest, protesters are very useful because if you want to see all the worst haircuts in England in one place, in one moment, a protest is where to do it. Mostly Antifa. You've got the blue hair, you've got the shape. I like to think that the more colours you have dyed into your hair, the more times you've willingly had sex with a step-parent. That's what I think. It's one colour for each time you've done it. And, yeah, I mean, you know, and maybe this is a latent punk rocker in me. Sometimes it's just fun to smash stuff up. And I know that's not a very GBNews thing to say, but have you ever kicked over a bin when you're drunk? It's pure joy. You just want to kick it over. Yeah, I mean...
Jonathan Cogan, everyone. And, I would like to say that we at GB News do not endorse in any way the vandalism of bins. Anyway, so let's move on. This is part of the show where we talk about social media, and often we talk about the things that have gone viral this week, the various video clips that do the rounds on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. And first up is this frankly remarkable video which features Amber Heard. She's giving her first interview since losing the defamation case against Johnny Depp, and she chose a strange way to put... Let's just have a look and see what she says.
In the closing arguments, the Depp lawyer called your testimony the performance of a lifetime and said you were acting. What do you say to that?
Says the lawyer for the man who convinced the world he had scissors for fingers.
OK, so now, watching that clip, I know what you're thinking, Leo. Look, you want to say something, don't you?
Does anything need to be said?
Well,
I mean, like, nobody was watching Edward Scissorhands thinking it was a documentary. He didn't convince anybody. We knew he was playing a character.
Well, but I have been told that this clip has been taken out of context. And actually, she's talking about the notion of acting, you know, and you know, people are accusing her of being an actor. And she is an actor, but she wasn't acting in the court. Is this one of those where they've taken the clip out of context and we're being a bit unfair on her?
I mean, they might have done for comic value, but I'm kind of surprised that she brought up Edward Scissorhands, because didn't she actually, like, chop a piece of his finger off at one point? It's a bit of a risky thing to mention. Yeah, she threw a knife at him, allegedly, and, like... Allegedly, and, like, bit of his finger went missing, and then, I don't know.
Well, that could have been anything.
That's true, but...
I don't want to get into the ins and outs of the court case, because it's an absolute minefield.
Sometimes I really wonder if her dog really did step in a pee.
I don't know anything about the court case, and I'm glad that I don't. Next up is this video, which features someone who teaches 8-year-old children, so she's showing off the books that she reads to the kids. And I'll say that none of them is Mr. Men or Little Miss.
I'm going to show you some books in my 3rd grade classroom with LGBTQ representation because representation matters. Pride, the story of Harvey Milk and the rainbow flag, is a true story of how the rainbow flag came to be a symbol of the LGBTQ community and what it means to that community today. Julian is a mermaid and Pink is for boys are 2 stories that challenge gender stereotypes and encourage boys to be who they want to be and to not conform to what society tells them that they have to. A Family is a Family is a Family is a story about all kinds of different family structures and what it really means to be a part of a family. Ho'onani Hula Warrior is a story of a non-binary person who challenges gender roles to kind of discover who they are on their journey to become a hula warrior. Let me know if you have...
OK, there's a lot of these books coming out at the moment. There was Feminist Baby, Woke Baby, Anti-Racist Baby, a lot of those activist literature effectively aimed at children. Is this just people attempting to indoctrinate the young?
I think it could be a mix. I think there will be some books which are definitely pushing like an ideological perspective, trying to get kids when they're young and really sort of get in their minds. Then again, I mean, I haven't read any of those, or all books in general, but like, that one about the history of the pride flag, if that was just sort of introducing children to, like, gay figures in history, then fine. But I haven't read it, so I don't know what it is.
No, yeah. I mean, no, exactly. I mean, there's a fine line there, isn't there? I mean, there's no reason why kids shouldn't learn about these various things. But some of these books, because I've read a few of them, an Anti-Racist Baby, for instance, where it's talking about how the white babies need to sort of be aware of their privilege. You just kind of think they're babies. They're babies.
Yeah, they're babies. Babies aren't inherently racist. I mean, I know that's an extreme far-right position to have in 2022, but I just don't believe that babies are racist, and it's something that's taught to them in schools now. Yeah. And in training classes sponsored by Santander. But, I mean, it's an absolute nonsense. And also, you know, it's fine to teach about history and, you know, the civil rights movement and all the rest of it, but to be putting ideas of transitioning and sexuality into children's heads before they're, you know, children aren't inherently sexual. It's something that happens when you get older. That's why we have, the age of consent and all that kind of thing. So, why would you want to put things about sexuality into a child's head?
There's a broader question here, isn't there? But I think the answer to that question is because a lot of this is about ideology rather than about teaching the facts of life. It's about teaching children to see the world in a certain ideological way. It would be the equivalent of doing, my first little book of Marxism or something like that, which I'm giving them ideas now, but that is something that probably happened. But then this comes from the right as well. I saw this book that's just come out, which is a children's book where it casts Donald Trump as the king, and the evil witch, Hillary Clinton, is the evil witch.
Did Donald Trump write it?
It's a mate of Donald Trump's wrote this book.
Are you sure it's aimed at children?
No, it may not be. But it did make me laugh. Maybe it's a hoax book. Maybe I've fallen for a hoax. But I saw this and I thought, well, I think everyone always used to say, everyone knows that if you get ideas into kids' heads at an early age, then you have them for life. And I suppose that's the point, isn't it? Because a lot of this sort of gender identity stuff doesn't stand up to rational scrutiny.
Yeah,
so
it's driven by the parents and by that. And it's interesting when the teacher's talking about boys rebelling against, societal norms. I mean, at the moment, if a boy was to rebel against societal norms, he'd just stay as a cisgender straight boy, like at the moment.
That would be quite radical.
The schools, from what I see from libs of TikTok and all the rest of it, the school teachers, leftist school teachers and liberal parents are trying to push their children and introduce their children to these ideas. And that's why, from certain backgrounds, you get a huge proportion of trans and LGBTQIA+++ kids, and from other backgrounds, you don't.
Yeah, but you are watching things like Libs of TikTok, which is a really funny site, I should say. But I would say that most teachers aren't like this. Most teachers aren't political.
No, I disagree. I mean, this ideology is coming through in schools. It's being taught. I think if you look at the politics of teachers, you're not going to get a balance between Republicans and Democrats.
Really?
And
well, I don't know. I haven't done the research. I wouldn't like to say.
Yeah.
And if you're just watching Libs of TikTok, you might get a skewed view.
Yeah.
Although what I would say with Libs of TikTok is an interesting site because obviously it's run by a conservative in America, and all they don't really comment.
Yeah.
All they do is take the clips of what these people, these sort of mad identitarians on the left are posting and play them.
Yeah.
So there's no one else to blame for themselves. But also, did you see this week that Twitter, there were some leaked discussions within Twitter from the staff about the Libs of TikTok account, and it came out, and they were basically saying, well, we managed to get rid of Trump, which was great, so why can't we get rid of this? This account makes us feel unsafe. Can't we get rid of this? So this conversation about whether social media platforms are biased, it's got to be over, hasn't it? We know that they are, and we know that they try and find ways they can legitimately censor. Maybe will Elon Musk come in and save the day?
I think Elon Musk is going to save all of us and then actively kill all of us accidentally.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. But I'm OK. I'll die by his hand. At the end of the earth.
Yeah, he is hubristic. Because he starts going on about, transhumanism, where we get microchips in our head and we become half robot. I don't want to be a robot.
It's inevitable. We're already cyborgs. We have our phones attached to us all the time. We're there.
There's that. Are you happy with becoming a robot?
I'd like to be a robot, to be freed from my decaying mortal body. And become
pretty good.
That'd be amazing.
You're actually sounding like a robot now. When you say that.
Just Scottish.
Yeah, just Scottish, exactly. No, that's rude. Anyway.
Sorry. Allegedly Scottish.
Our third video this evening, this is a bit lighter. So this was tweeted by Matt Osman, who's the bass player in Suede, Richard Osman's brother. It shows a husky showing off its singing skills. So what's happened there, of course, they've got the auto-tune microphone to adapt the dog's voice. You always know we're scraping the bottom of the barrel when we're showing dog videos. But what I would say... auto-tune, I blame Cher for this.
Yeah. She started it.
She started the whole auto-tune thing with Believe, and, it's all been downhill since then.
It really is. I mean, I enjoyed that more than Lizzo's new song, but at the same time, it's overly processed. I like kind of more natural dog singing, like a dog and an acoustic guitar.
Is that what you like?
Yeah, that's my...
There's very little that we can say about the dog video, but it's just nice to play a funny dog, isn't
it? I mean, it would be better if it was on a skateboard as well.
It would be better.
Love it when they're on a skateboard.
Are you familiar with Lizzo? Because we were talking about this earlier, about Lizzo's new song and how it's got an offensive word that we're not going to say today.
Yeah, she's massive. And also quite popular. Just for Leah.
Goodness me. Do you think that she should be careful about the lyrics that she uses?
So I can... What do I think? I think the word has a different meaning in America. So the word she uses, it kind of means I'm freaking out or I'm getting angry about this in that context, right?
Right.
I mean, was I offended by it? I wasn't. I could see how people were, but...
Are you a fan of Lizzo, though?
Not massively. Some of her tunes are pretty good. It's not necessarily... It's a bit too, I guess, poppy for my taste.
Oh, you like something a bit more rough around the edges?
Exactly, yeah.
What sort of thing? John Cage, that kind of thing?
Yeah, just silence or prepared pianos.
Yeah,
real avant-garde.
People don't know what we're talking about now, do they?
Read a book.
OK, so let's move on now. So this is a video that was filmed in central London yesterday during the cost of living protests that were arranged by a number of trade unions. However, one group stood out more than most, not only because they were covered in these red face masks, but also because of what they were chanting. Here's what happened.
Ho Chi Minh! Ho Chi Minh! Ho Chi Minh! Ho Chi Minh! Ho Chi Minh!
OK, in case you missed that, that's Ho Chi Minh, Che Guevara, Stalin. Which is quite catchy. I mean, it rhymes. They missed out a few murderers, didn't they? Harold Shipman wasn't mentioned. They could have got Jack the Ripper, maybe.
It's almost like a Christmas song, Ho Chi Minh.
Yeah! All that violation of the Geneva Convention was quite... If he'd have been dressed as Santa when he did it, it would have been all right.
He does wear red, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, do you think there's a... How can I put it? Maybe they haven't read their history to be chanting in a jolly way.
Or do they know it and they're just like, yeah, we'll kill anyone who dissents? Is that
right? Look, can there be anyone who thinks that Stalin was a pretty decent guy, really?
Yeah, people on the left.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do.
No.
Because if you're on the left, then the ends justify the means. So Stalin was aiming towards this socialist utopia. I mean, it might have been a mirage. You'll never get there. You'll never achieve it. But just the fact that you're going towards this utopia, this noble ideal, means that it's OK to starve, torture and murder 40 million people.
I know lots of sensible left-wing people who would not approve whatsoever of Stalin or the mass murder of people. You're talking about extremists, right? You're talking about extreme radicals.
I don't think these people are particularly extreme radicals.
They were dressed in red masks.
Maybe I've spent too long on the comedy circuit.
Yeah.
Those masks were COVID compliant, which they'll get a tick box for that. So yeah, I mean, I think these attitudes are dangerously prevalent, particularly amongst younger people in the left.
How is it not such a stigma to chant in favour of Stalin, and why is that not the same as chanting in favour of Hitler, who also killed millions? Why is there why the double standards?
That's a great question, and you'd really have to ask the left that, and why standing up for women's rights and not wanting children to transition at the age of 6 is seen as an extreme far right fascist position, and while chanting for actual dictators who've tortured and murdered tens of millions of people is seen as an acceptable thing to do.
Yeah, something very strange is going on. We've only got time for one of my unfiltered dilemmas, and this came in from Emily in Somerset, which reads, I think my mum is losing her marbles. She started talking to her animals and picks up random hobbies on a near-weekly basis. Should I be concerned? Well, Jonathan?
I definitely do both of those things. I get a new hobby. I can just watch a YouTube video and be like, OK, I'm into crocheting now. Like, that'll be me for a week.
Well, I think the answer to your question, Emily, is yes, you should be concerned. We would have more time normally to discuss it and sort of really help you, but we're just going to leave you hanging this week. Because, I'm sorry about that. Thank you for joining us for Free Speech Nation, and thank you, of course, to my panel, Leo Kearse and Jonathan Cogan, and to my guests, Bev Jackson, Kate Harris, Paula London and Debbie Hayton. And if you want to hear more from the comedian Simon Evans, you can do that. That's on Free Speech Nation, the podcast. The full interview is live now. You can access that wherever you usually download your podcasts. And, by the way, if you want to join us live here in the studio and be part of our wonderful audience, you can do that. Please go to www.sroaudiences.com. That's right there on the screen as I speak. And you can come and join us, and there's some free food and drink. You'll have a great time. Stay tuned for Mark Dolan tonight. That's right next. And we'll be back next week at 7 o'clock. See you then.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK will be dry and sunny for most, although rain arrives into northwest Scotland later. Here are the details. Monday morning will start bright and chilly across southwest England. It'll be dry with plenty of sunny spells, but it will be rather cool with temperatures in single figures to start the day. Skies will be partly cloudy across southeast England in the morning, but there will still be plenty of sunny spells through the morning. Lots of sunshine to start the day in Wales. It'll feel chilly at dawn, but feeling pleasantly warm by late morning. A dry morning is expected in northwest England, with plenty of sunny spells and lighter winds compared to the weekend. Largely dry in the northeast, however the northerly breeze will push a few light showers onto the east coast at times. Scotland is looking dry and sunny on Monday morning, but it will be cold in places with a touch of frost in parts of the countryside. Sunshine will last through the morning in Northern Ireland, and the winds will be lighter than recent days, feeling chilly to start the day. Most places will stay dry and bright through Monday morning, however skies will gradually cloud over in northwest Scotland with outbreaks of rain later. And that's how the weather is shaping up during Monday morning.
On Mark Dolan tonight, my Mark Meets guest is troubled football genius Jermaine Pennant. Hear his incredible story of recovery and redemption at 10. We'll be celebrating Father's Day, so send in pictures of your dad to mark@gbnews.uk. And that's the topic of our big question this evening. Do dads still matter? And in my big opinion, David Beckham's World Cup hypocrisy, and why Nicola Sturgeon will never take Scotland out of the UK. See you at 9.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or on